So your question is?
My question, Bante, is how best can Kalyanamitas support each other? In other words, how to be a good Kalyanamitta at this Dhamma?
For listeners or people who don't know what Kalyanamitta is, it's the best specimen of a friend that you could ever find in all your existences. True friend, if there's ever a true friend, that is a Kalyanamitta. A spiritual friend who supports another spiritual friend, not holding anything back, guided by the truth that is the Dhamma. Honest, generous, giving, sacrificing of oneself, and placing one's own wants, needs to the side in order for them to make room for the needs and wants of another, specifically a spiritual friend. So that's a Kalyanamitta, one way of understanding it, of course. The best way, there isn't just one way, I would say. There's many ways, but they must all come from the source of selflessness. And if one is truly Kalyanamitta, then they cannot help but be selfless. So I guess an indirect way of addressing that question would be to make sure that you're not selfish. That's the best way that you can be good Kalyanamittas to one another. Another way is through your practice. Because what's the point of being a Kalyanamitta if you're not practicing? Just because you want to call yourself a spiritual friend? You're on each other's like speed dial on your phones. You text each other, or you message each other, or you send each other some lovely Dhamma quotes. Be moved, inspired, get goosebumps, here and there. Oh yes, yes, and then talk about it. I really have a difficulty separating such so-called friendships and or gatherings or assemblies and others that happen on a Friday night when people go out to the movies and then they go to a diner or a restaurant or a coffee shop and sit down and talk about their experience. There's really no difference. If that is, there's nothing wrong, one would say, on the surface with the latter group. We're just regular people going and enjoying a movie, this and that. But a Kalyanamitta relationship is totally different. Because genuine Kalyanamittas have the common denominator of urgency in their hearts. Urgency to end, stop, remove, eradicate the presence of and conditions for the roots of suffering. In other words, they inspire one another. They must inspire one another to excel, to delve deeper into their practice, to delve deeper and beyond one's own ideas about what the path is or supposed to be. There's trust there. trust, true trust, which is beyond the observable, of course. If it's observable, it doesn't require much trust, does it? There's faith and confidence in the purity of one's heart, and then you feel safe in the purity of the other. Their confidence, their trust in their own path, in the genuineness of their drive to be practicing purity of life, meaning virtue, sila, by maintaining a wholesome lifestyle while practicing the precepts, staunch dedication to mind cultivation, mental cultivation, collectedness of the heart, samadhi, where the heart is becoming more and more tranquil thanks to the practice. And as a result, there are new revelations through insights that these individuals are experiencing on their own, because they are supported by their own practice. So none of the things I just mentioned come easy. They require effort, they require work. That's why a person who is stuck in their old ways of doing things, believing in things, can never be a Kalyana Mitta, so long as they're still there in their mind. Whatever comes comfortable, whatever comes natural, whatever is familiar, we're sticking to those. Type of mentality cannot even come close to becoming a Kalyana Mitta to anyone, because they are clueless. They don't have a North Star. Their GPS system is crooked. Why? Because the Dhamma doesn't lead in their lives. They move and push and shove the Dhamma the way and however they want to see it serve their purposes. Kalyana Mittas don't know the meaning of pretension. They don't know what it looks like. They've abandoned such things, such mannerisms, things, mores, customs of society. Every day you discover a new layer of yourself that you thought was impossible to reach. A level that is so pure, unprecedented in your experience of living. So Kalyana Mittas help you to take you to depths unprecedented, to heights unprecedented, of your own goodness, allowing you to penetrate and go beyond the mundane world. So true Kalyana Mitta has nothing to do with the mundane world. They don't get their sustenance from the mundane world. A true Kalyana Mitta is someone who does not need to have so many friends, In fact, the friends that you used to have to get rid of them. You don't have to, they will drop off by themselves. Actually, that's the great thing about the Dhamma. Whatever is not needed, they will fall off, unless you go ahead and start putting crazy glue on those dead branches to try to keep them there, hoping that they will not be fallen off your life path. So a Kalyanamitta is somebody who knows where they're going. They have an intention and they are putting their energy, resources to that, not the maintenance of their past. So they have their eyes in front of their heads, right below the forehead, above the nose, not behind the head, looking back. No, you're looking ahead. That's how you can advance, that's how you can progress. That's how you can see a Kalyanamitta. A Kalyanamitta allows you to trust in yourself, in your abilities. As I mentioned, goodness. Even if you can't see them, you will be made aware of and start to really acquaint yourself with that part of you, which is necessary to see and understand the Dhamma. This was, after all, the reason why Venerable Ananda turned to Lord Buddha one time and said, Bhante, the spiritual path is, I consider it to be, extremely well connected to the presence of a Kalyanamitta. In fact, having a Kalyanamitta in my life is 50% of the spiritual path. That's how important it is. And Lord Buddha was very quick to correct him. And he says, no. Don't say that, Ananda. Do not say such a thing. This spiritual holy path is very much connected to the presence of Kalyanamitta in one's life, but the role of which is not 50%, it is 100% of the holy life. Having a Kalyanamitta in one's life is 100%. That's why in the Mangala Sutta, Lord Buddha says, having the ability to distinguish between fools and wise people, and therefore avoiding the fools, is already a great source of wonderful blessings. So the wise people here is a reference to the Kalyanamitta in one's life. The fools will never be Kalyanamittas. The foolish people in your life, the mundane people, the ordinary Putujjanas can never become Kalyanamittas in your life, despite one's own memories, associations, this and that, however they meant, let's say, in one's life. If you have such people in your life, they can never cover up for Kalyanamitta. They can't be, unless they too are practicing genuinely, unless they too are practicing generosity, sacrificing of oneself, of one's valuables, whether it's your time, energy, money, resources, things that you're holding on to. Second, Do they live with virtue in their hearts, with purity, and not fall for society's dictates, family responsibilities and things like that? Well, I have to be there, I have to do that. While they're going, I have to go. No. You used to do that when you were a kid, a child. Holding on to mommy's skirt, pulling you this way and that. But now you're an adult. You will say no to things that are against the Dhamma and not think twice about that. Is the person doing that? Next, are they practicing the purification of the mind, the heart? Going deeper in their meditation. And then lastly, are they wise? Or are they foolish? People don't like to consider themselves having individuals in their lives who are foolish or idiots. We always presume that our friends are wisest people ever. That's where you need to be practicing some honesty. To look at your life and really see these individuals that I hold as so valuable in my life, but would they do the things that I do? Or do I do the things that they do? Things that I don't agree with. And if that's the case, then we have a problem. If they don't do the things that we're talking about here, living with purity, then you have a problem by sticking around to such people. So this is where maturity has to happen, and you cut off those stifling, thorny branches from your life which are not helping you grow. So Kalyana Mitta is someone who will be pointing these things out fearlessly. Not afraid to deal with whatever you might, or how you might take it, as it were. So societies, especially now, protocols don't necessarily apply all the time with Kalyana Mittas, because the value system is totally different. It's on a higher level. Yes, there's a lot more subtlety to it. One has to be a lot more sensitive, because you are talking about the creme de la creme of your social circles, I guess you can call it. The finest specimen of that. The possibility for you to be having such pure people. When you look back in history, in Western history, for example, you get to the one that I am reminded of were the Knights of the Round Table of King Arthur, the legend. I don't know if it was true or not, some say it was. The noble ones, in those terms. The knights. They lived with such high, lofty standards of living. Of course, this is it's not a fair comparison, but just to give some idea as to the world that they came out of was the Dark Ages. Rough, cruel, ruthless, murderous, futile. If you had the ability, you would just take it. However, these individuals had made certain vows that they would never do such things and live chaste lives, celibate lives, as powerful men, warriors. But of course, it just fell apart because people are people, because the guiding principles weren't there strong enough, as the case is with the very firm structure, the foundation, unmistakable foundation, that doesn't leave much room for other interpretations, basically. And what I'm referring to is the Dhamma here. So the Kalyana Mittas hold to each other because they are solidly supported by the principles of the Dhamma. So they don't use the Dhamma to accommodate for their own needs. No, they live and strive and grow thanks to the Dhamma, which is in their hearts. Not everyone is on the same level, especially when it comes to difficult conditions that one has to face while the other doesn't, let's say. But the cold that one is experiencing is driven off by the warmth that is there in the presence of a Kalyana Mitta who comes in and gives you the life of the Dhamma, reminds you of the Dhamma. That's another form of generosity. That's the truest sense of love, which doesn't have any other ulterior motives. There isn't affection, because affection can be quite dangerous. It can lead to other things. When we're talking about subtle layers of refinement of the mind, of the heart, and of purity, of living virtuously within or between Kalyana Mittas. Because ultimately the goal for Kalyana Mittas is to see each other becoming arahants. That's the goal, if there is one. They support each other. Does that help? Any other questions?
Why is restraint of the senses so important?
Why do we have a door? A gate outside? Why do you have a mouth? Why do you have eyelids? Leave them open and you'll see what happens. It is the misplaced trust that we have with the world and the six senses, the world of the six senses, that has allowed us to think of, driven us to think that restraint is something bad. Restraint for things that will pollute, will endanger, will sully, will bring dirt in, unwanted attention, restraint towards all things. Anyone in their right mind will say, of course it's necessary. Even the most free-thinking hippie will say, well, yeah, we need to have a gate. Yeah, we need to have locks on the doors. If they don't say that, if they don't agree to that, then there's something wrong with them. They're delusional. And you have a lot of delusional people in the world. But some things they will all agree upon, such as driving a car with brakes on. Nobody's going to get into a car, full tank of gas, engine that runs well, but the brake fluid is all messy. It's not there. Or the brakes aren't there. The brake pads aren't working. Well, why won't they get into that car? Because they know that the car's restraints are off. They will die. Why? Because it's dangerous. They won't let any one of their loved ones to get into that car, to be driven home with that. Not having restraint over what we say, what we look at, especially what we allow the mind to think, is even more dangerous. The worst thing that can happen when you get into a car without brakes, or having a house without, door that's lock and key and all that, is you might get some crazy person come and kill you. An animal, a wild, ferocious animal might come and do that also, and you die. That's it. That's the end of the story, right? But if you have a tendency of not locking up, not restraining the mind from wherever it wants to go, or looking at everything that your awareness, your visual awareness picks up, that will become something that you'll take with you wherever you go, in whatever life form you take. That's even more dangerous, therefore, especially the mind. That's why a foolish mind is a terrible, terrible possession. You got to relinquish that. You have to let that die, abandon it, relinquish it immediately. That's why we study the Dhamma, to help us relinquish those foolish tendencies and to understand the place of restraint. Some years ago there was a movie I had watched. It was called, I think, some elements of it are inappropriate, the movie, from what I recall actually, but just the gist of it. Jim Carrey had a movie called Yes Man. So he goes to this apparently seminar, and there's this very flamboyant motivational speaker type life coach person who is like a guru basically, who's teaching the audience to say yes to everything. Well, under the pressures of being surrounded by people who were all following blindly, or like cult figures, or cult members, he starts thinking that, yes, I have to say yes to everything. So he does that. And he is met with so many difficult circumstances and situations, but also some good ones. Eventually he gets in trouble, where even this guru / life coach tries to knock some sense into him, because he gets him in trouble, I think. He gets the guru in trouble. Injured and almost like fatal accident, I think, from what I recall. And the guru tells him, no, you don't say yes to everything. There are certain things you have to say no to. So even they got the message. Such characters, they even have the message. Because our relationship with our senses is that they have a carte blanche access. Anything that your senses pick up are totally fine. You shouldn't question them. Especially your thoughts. Your thoughts are sacrosanct. Your feelings you should never doubt. You should accept. And that's what a personality disorder person, someone who has personality disorder, follows. And you have a lot of them. They ruin people's lives, you know. Chances are you have somebody in your life like that. If you have 5, 10 people in your life, chances are you have someone, if not already, they're called high conflict personality. They ruin people's lives. Unless you hold your ground, unless you have a very strong boundary setting around you to say no to toxic, to harmful things. But your mind is even worse. Your feelings are even worse. If your position towards them is very permissive. I would shake my head looking at seeing how parents would raise and discipline, so-called discipline, their children. How they would behave. The control was actually in the hands of the child, especially teenagers. I noticed this as a middle school, high school teacher, and later on as a family therapist. It's shocking how parents, out of fear, many parents, out of fear of falling out of favor in their child's eyes, they will say yes to everything, which will drive the child away from them, by the way. Achieving that which they're afraid of most from happening, it will happen. And they have zero respect for the parents, the children. Or those parents who keep giving things, gifts, this, that, undeserved gifts, rewards to the children. Again, to compensate for love, to compensate for discipline. There's no restraint. The child has to hear no from the parents. You're supposed to be the parent. You're the adult. You've been living on the planet for a longer time. You must have a say in things instead of being a pushover. So, our feelings and thoughts have been treating us as pushover. We are being pushed over by our feelings, basically. Our thoughts, our tendencies, our mental habits of behavior. This is why we practice meditation. To anchor yourself down and see what's happening, to slow things down to such a point where you will be able to detect when the eyes veer off, go somewhere else where they're not supposed to. Well, I'm sorry, it's a beautiful thing I want to see because I always wanted to see that kind of a thing and now it's in front of me. You want me to shut my eyes? Yeah. If it's going to create chaos, if it's going to get you to think about it later, obsess over for a long time. If that's going to be the case, absolutely, look away. And then people come and say, I don't know what happened, but I just kept on thinking about this. I keep thinking about, okay, what happened? What happened before? What happened before? And then it comes down to that one incident, one event where they gave attention to something that they knew they should not have. Rap music, for example, children were listening to it in the late 80s, early 90s, and then parents were like saying, what is this? What are all these, crazy, offensive, harsh, hostile, irreverent disrespectful, hurtful, immoral, unethical lyrics. No, it's just a way of expression. Well, a murderer is self-expressing, They're expressing their anger. So society, too, has forgotten what the meaning of restraint is. And we use always, in the U.S., we use the, your First Amendment or, right to express yourself, all that stuff. Well, without wisdom, anything can be used against us to our own detriment. Those rules or laws are there for a good purpose, but in the presence of wisdom. But before, we go out branching out, what really matters is the restraint that one has over one's own self, one's own behavior, not just physical behavior, verbal behavior, which is speech, but your mental behavior, which sooner or later will show up in your externally manifested behavior, your conduct, your character. That's why we practice restraint. Otherwise, it would be the same thing as going to the zoo, going where the lions are kept, and there are no fences or gates or cages, bars separating you both. And we know what's going to happen. You're going to be lunch. Or walking into the area of the zoo where they keep the reptiles, venomous reptiles. And you letting your children run free inside that area, where you know that there are black mambas, king cobras, rattlesnakes freely roaming about. Just the image of it can cause a person, sweat and fear. Why? Because there's one thing that's missing: restraint. In this case, close the door. Cage them up. Put them in somewhere, that they're separated. Protect. The same thing right now that's happening in the southern states, the southeastern part of the United States with hurricanes. Flooding. People are losing their lives, their homes, their valuables, their way of life. Why? Because the levees break. Things that the barriers that were supposed to protect don't hold, crumble, and all of a sudden there's flooding into the house, into the basement, into their lives. Restraint means having a powerful dam, having a powerful protective shield around you from doing something stupid that will cost you your tranquility, your peace, as well as those of others. Otherwise, you will end up doing things that's simply because you're capable of doing. Simply because you can do something doesn't mean that you go ahead and you do it, or you should do it. We live in a society or a time period that's what is being advocated for. You just have to be given the idea, the images of it. That's what people do with movies, with music videos, this and that, lyrics of songs and books, titles of books. I think I mentioned some time ago, I was in Europe and I saw a book in English. I thought I misread it, but it says, How to Kill Your Parents and Get Away with It, something like that. Anyway, I think it was written for like teenage girls or something, and it was written by a woman. This is a society that is completely without any brakes on it left. No brakes. You can't even stop it with your own, Flintstone animation. I remember they would have this car made out of stone and rocks, and wheels made out of rocks. In order for them to stop the car, Fred Flintstone would get his foot out and just use it as brakes. We don't even have that luxury now, the speed that we're going at as a society. We don't have any restraints. And when we allow such debacles happen. So this is, as you noticed, hitting all the different layers and tiers of society. But when you have a president who gets up and starts lying to the people, drinking Coca-Cola, this was happening in the 90s with Bill Clinton, lying straight through his teeth. Of course, people before him, presidents before him, were doing, the lying. It didn't start with him, And then children would see. And they would recognize that this is a lie. Parents would see. So now we just validated that there's a double standard. Value systems crash. And then we wonder, why is there so much crime in the world today? It's no longer an American problem, a Western cultural problem. It's everywhere. Everywhere. Why? Because idiocy or foolishness does not carry a passport. It doesn't come with skin color, with the color of one's eyes or one's ethnic heritage. Stupidity is stupidity, But one thing is for certain, there is pain to be experienced by that person engaging in such stupid, harmful actions. Why? Because they have no restraint. So restraint, not just for the sake of restraint, but there's growth from that. When you do have those dams, those levees, those things that protect the neighborhood, the cities from the flooding, the rising of the water, let's say, what you're doing is you're protecting this area then to keep it dry, but also to make sure that the life continues. Kids could go to school, people could have dinner together, people could play, fathers could play with their sons, mothers could play with their daughters. Life can prosper. Crime is diminished to zero. So it's not just to put up dams and walls and to keep people imprisoned there. Restraint, that's not the point, to live in prison. No. Because the moment you don't look at that thing over there, that person who's, let's say, barely clothed, you're also teaching your children what to do. You're also teaching your wife that you're an honorable man. Next time she sees somebody barely, clothed like that, she won't look, because she's going to think, well, that's not appropriate because my loved one didn't do that. Me doing this, it's actually going to hurt. So this is what is called empowerment, the way I understand it. This is really protecting each other. This is caring for one another. This is valuing one another. Why? Because you restrained yourself from doing something stupid. And your children are going to look at you and they're going to say, wow, Dad has a powerful self-control. The neighbor said something, but Dad did not retaliate. I don't think I can do that. Next time Johnny over there bullies me at school, I'm going to try to be like my dad. Guess what? Through your own behavior, your own conduct, by restraining yourself, pulling yourself back from doing something stupid, you allow Johnny, well, your own son, to be wiser next time. To say no when he knows that his next action could bring good results or terrible results, where he has to end up in the, principal's office or something. So you see, there's a chain reaction. When you, however, have irresponsible behavior, then you have an irresponsible society. You have an irresponsible world. And you have an impure world, unsafe world. So restraint will allow you to protect yourself, your family, your home, because you started by protecting your character with the restraint, by the way you look at your thoughts and feelings. No, you have a special braking system. A mechanism is in place to protect you from harmful thoughts, harmful feelings that no one knows about, just you do. But they will affect your behavior. And when they do affect your behavior, your family is going to pick up, your co-workers are going to pick up, your work is going to fail, it's going to show the poor quality in your workmanship, professionalism. That means your gates are wide open. There's no restraint. And if you're doing that, others are doing that, now we're, basically what's happening in the 21st century in the world. This is exactly because everyone is led by greed, lust. Having one husband is not enough. Having one wife is not enough now all of a sudden. One partner is not enough. Having one gender is not enough. You have to keep changing it up. Why? Because people, I don't know, everyone's doing that. That's what I'm hearing in Netflix. So maybe it's the normal thing. Being who you are is no longer enough. Nobody's putting the barriers and saying, enough. What is this? So restraint. Which, by the way, today's society does not like to hear that. Well, that's why we're in this mess, both as individuals and as a society. So you want to clean society, you want to clean your life, turn it around, check your gate, check your lock system. Alarms are good, but you have to do something with the alarm. Alarm is just an alarm. It's just, in a sense, it's very passive. You must do something with it. It's like the brake pedal, it's there, it's not doing anything. You have to step on it to stop it. You have to bolt the door so that no one can crash into your world, destroy your life, your family. So don't trust all that your six senses pick up. You have to be the guardian. Not all of the stuff that your eyes see are good. Not all of the things that you're going to hear are good. But especially the thoughts that we have are not going to be all that good. Because we need to do the sifting process until it becomes a habitual pattern where you're going to detect what is wholesome, what is unwholesome. And only the wholesome is going to have the right credentials to be entered, to be allowed into your world. Your boundaries, your border is very well protected. That's what's missing. But that's what you can bring back if you have restraint. Does that answer your question?